Hello, my name is Dr. John Hulsman, and welcome to my latest vlog for España. This one is near and dear to my heart. In 2006, I wrote a book with Anatole Lieven called Ethical Realism, which caused a great deal of controversy, whereby we were two card-carrying members of the American foreign policy establishment, biting the hand that feeds us, saying that the establishment on the left, the liberal interventionists, and on the right, the neoconservatives, their obsession with nation building would lead to disaster in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And this was a highly contentious thing to say at the time, which of course has been utterly vindicated. And yet in watching the scenes of the last 10 days, the heart-rending scenes in Kabul, and seeing the chaos, the unnecessary chaos, for instance, getting rid of Bagram Air Force Base by the Biden administration, it's easy to lose heart and forget these underlying lessons that really should be what we're focusing on. But of course, the nation builders of the left and the right wanted a convenient excuse for you to stop paying attention to what happened and what they did so terribly wrong. And we must not let them get away with this magic trick. It's a republic, and we should hold people accountable. Both public policy intellectuals at conferences, it's not in bad taste to question their record when it's terrible. It's what we do for a living, as well as political leaders who lead people over matters of life and death, which is what this has been involved in. If Mr. Jefferson said we should pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, we should take him at his word and take this very seriously indeed. So what did I write so long ago in 2006 that has been upheld, and what lessons can we learn about Afghanistan beyond the immediate chaos, the deeper lessons that are out there? Well, I think there are four. First of all, Afghanistan is not a discrete political event. It's part of a larger chain and failure of nation building. Afghanistan was part of a whole way of looking at the world, that you can add water and get George Washington, that in a utopian way, societies can relatively easily be remade. And it was attempted in Somalia, it was attempted in Haiti, it was attempted in Libya, Iraq, as well as Afghanistan. And in all these cases, it failed utterly. In Somalia, the United States cut and run rather early on because it had so few interests in Somalia, begging the question why we got there in the first place. Somalia is still in utter chaos and is a breeding ground for terror. We did nothing to meet these high-minded goals. The United States has invaded Haiti over a dozen times in the last century, and it's still a voodoo-riven kleptocracy, which is an economic basket case. No positives there either. Barack Obama rightly said that Libya and intervening in Libya was the dumbest thing that he did, pressured by the European allies who wanted to remove a bad man, Muammar Gaddafi, running a stable country. We instead left the place in utter chaos, with ISIS on the southern border, endemic civil war, and the danger always of a refugee crisis in the midst of all this chaos. So again, disastrous outcome. Iraq, do I really need to say anything, or can we just accept this was a catastrophe? And now last but not least, Afghanistan. The next time anyone tells you that nation building can be done or is easy, they have to explain away this litany of failure. This is like Charlie Brown kicking the football. Lucy threatens over and over again that, Charlie Brown, I won't knock it away from you this time. I'll cajole you out. You can kick it. He tries and fails because she never lets him do so. This is Einstein's definition of insanity, making mistakes over and over again and expecting a different outcome. It has simply failed empirically in the court of history over and over again. The second point is even if you were to do nation building right, you wouldn't have done so in the cases of both Iraq and Afghanistan because you cannot remake a society of which you know almost nothing. One of the great joys of my intellectual life was that I was asked by Simon & Schuster to write the foreword to Lawrence of Arabia's 27 articles, his magisterial book on how to deal with developing peoples. And he says the secret to doing so is the unremitting study of them. The unremitting study of developing peoples. Well, this certainly wasn't the case in either Afghanistan or Iraq. In the case of Afghanistan, we would have known if we bothered learning any history that there was no nation to build. Afghanistan has been a geographical expression. It's not a nation. It's a series of tribes bound together in the same area who coordinate loosely when they're invaded to throw off the invader. But mainly it's Pashtuns, Uzbeks, Hazaras, Tajiks, living in their own area, having a very weak central government and a lot of local control. So instead we went in, pretended it was some sort of centralized nation, utterly artificial to their situation, and imposed this from outside. Well, of course, it's collapsed immediately because it was artificial to begin with. And if we bother learning any history from, say, since Alexander the Great onward, people would have known this, but they thought they were utopians. They had gone beyond history. And of course, when you think that, history tends to bite you back. In Iraq, I can speak from personal experience. While I was at the Heritage Foundation, I was asked to brief many of the people who then went on to run the place, and I would give them a standard 30-minute briefing on the differences between being a Sunni, a Shia, and the Kurds, which are the basic building blocks of Iraq, another geographic expression, not a country. If you ask the people of the region, other than exiles, only listened to in Washington, they would tell you they're Sunni, Shia, and Kurds, not Iraqis. But that didn't fit with our sense of what they ought to be, so we ignored what they thought they were and went our own merry way. Is it any surprise that people who didn't know the difference between Sunnis, Shia, and the Kurds didn't make a success of the Iraq War or nation building? Extraordinary hubris. You know nothing of the society, but it can be easily remade, and of course it can't. The third thing is that we shouldn't listen to the losing gambler syndrome. This notion that I wrote about in my most recent book, To Dare More Boldly, that what you simply have to do is every time things go wrong, you just stay longer. And this is what we said in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, the last two forever wars. Think of it this way. Dad goes and gambles away the kid's college money, but he can't tell mom about this, so what does he do? He stays at the table, keeps playing, and keeps losing. Because the problem in the first place, the fearful odds of playing roulette, are never discussed. And this is how casino magnates make money, and this is how militaries stay in quagmires they ought to have gotten out of long ago. This was the problem in Vietnam. This was the problem with the forever wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Because great sacrifices were made to no gain, one must stay, and of course the longer you stay, the greater the sacrifice. And as a result, you never, ever leave. So to sum up, what are the big lessons we can learn here? One, Afghanistan is part of a larger problem, a historical problem, where nation building failed over and over and over again. Two, the reason it failed was that cultural norms were not taken into account. And instead of listening to Lawrence of Arabia, they had a one-size-fits-all, add water and get George Washington approach. And three, Washington fell victim to the losing gambler syndrome, which made them stay forever in a losing position. We must learn from these mistakes and hold the people who put us in this situation to account. In a Republican government, this is the least we can do. Those who got us into this mess over and over and over again must never again darken the door of government. We simply have to do better in a new world order where we have a peer competitor in China breathing down our necks. We can only deal with this if we think clearly about our mistakes in the past and move ahead. Thank you very much.